Well, there are many incredibly strong heroes in Overwatch 2. There's one that I don't think gets the respect he deserves, especially in this meta, and that's Reaper. In a tank-dominated meta, Reaper is your saving grace to have actual impact. So we're going to break down 5 tips and mistakes that you're making on the character that is preventing you from climbing, and how to use him and abuse him to get free wins. Smash that subscribe and your dad will finally come home, and let's jump right in. Hey, if that was a little out of pocket, remember, we got to add in some edgy jokes in here. We're talking about Reaper after all. Okay, I'll stop. But the first thing that you need to think about when playing Reaper is that cover and the high ground are your ally when playing this character. You want to either start on the high ground with that natural cover so you can drop onto the enemy and use that as a form of instant mobility because you're away from the enemy completely and then boom, you're right on them dealing massive amounts of damage right away. And you want to play around doors and corners because Reaper gets to jiggle in and out of these corners, just peeking the enemy for a very brief amount of time, either dealing damage, seeing key opportunities, or waiting for enemies to walk by and pass him by for him to go on the appropriate target. A Reaper never wants to be in the open because he can't do anything in the open. Unless he's actively routing to his target or shooting his target to the point where they're actually taking damage, like he's in a reasonable range to them. He doesn't want to just be fighting enemies when there's a huge gap between them because it's way outside his effective range, and in open space, you are very, very vulnerable to many of the other DPS in the game. Now, many ask the question, why should you play Reaper? What are some of the benefits to playing Reaper in this meta? And the thing you need to understand is that the meta tanks that exist enable Reaper greatly. Let's first talk about Zarya, which I think has the best synergy with Reaper. Being able to aggressively teleport into the enemy backline or the high ground and use a bubble to protect a Reaper is incredibly powerful. Many times the Zarya bubble is going to protect you from that form of CC, and you're going to either get a kill or force enemies completely to give up their positioning, which gives your team a huge advantage. Now, while I do suggest setting up in a duo and trying to coordinate this because it's really, really great, a little bit of an easier one to set up and just naturally is going to happen playing games of solo queue ranked is pairing with D.Va. And the 2 reasons that Reaper and D.Va work well together is 1, D.Va can actually protect Reaper, get him out of sticky situations so he can afford to be a little bit more greedy and keep him alive as he transverses through open space. But the true best thing about playing a D.Va with a Reaper is about the matchups and the fact that every matchup that Reaper has a problem with, D.Va has game against. So let's talk about some of the matchups that Reaper does struggle with. Matchups like Widow, Sojourn, Hanzo, characters that can either scout him out like Hanzo or dink him and one-tap him, which is Sojourn, Widow, and Hanzo. And of course, general CC is also a problem for Reaper. He never wants to get stopped. He wants to keep gaining that lifesteal and sustain in a fight for a very long time. But D.Va can stop all those things. She could stop the sleep. She could stop the freaking arrows that are trying to dink him. She can put pressure on the Widow. She can stop the Sojourn. So when you combine everything together with D.Va, she works incredibly well at shutting down a lot of Reaper's counters while also enabling him. And then Zarya, who's played a lot, is just really great with him. So regardless of the 2 main meta tanks that are played, Reaper slots into that perfectly. And we're also going to talk about why he counters them towards the end of the video, so stay tuned till that. Now, moving on to the third thing that you need to understand about Reaper, and this is a really big mistake that a lot of new Reaper players make, is they overestimate his sustain. Now, I know that Reaper has a lifesteal, right? He's going to gain life as he does damage, but realistically, it gives him a little bit more attrition, right? He's going to gain a tiny amount of health as he fights, but it's not enough to just completely circumvent healing, and it's not enough for you to fight completely by yourself, attacking multiple people. Most of the time, unless the enemy has a very low time to kill, the healing isn't going to keep you at parity, and they're still going to be able to kill you, and you would rather focus on Reaper's very fast time to kill and high burst damage, rather than trying to rely on that healing when it's just simply not enough. Now, we did talk about how Reaper doesn't want characters that can one-tap him, but he is very afraid of CC as well. Any form of crowd control that can potentially stun him or stop him will prevent him from escaping with his Wraith or going in for more damage, and he has to be very careful around things like sleep, hook, even boop oftentimes will completely mess up his play and force him to back off most of the time. Now, if you manage to properly track these cooldowns and an enemy uses them, you can invest some amount of your abilities to bait them out and then go back in after the enemy. A great example of this is instead of just using Wraith to run away, let's say you go and pressure that Ana, you Wraith and dodge the sleep. Now you can full commit back to that Ana because she has no way to stop your burst damage, and you're going to be able to basically just kill her for free unless she has substantial amount of peel, which you should analyze before you commit to a play like this. Now, you don't just track CC, you track general cooldowns, whether that's DM, bubble, pretty much anything that is going to prevent you from making a play. Especially if you're trying to set up an ultimate. A good ultimate could be team fight winning and you kill multiple people and just win the game. But a bad ultimate is going to do nothing and get you killed. It's very easy for your ultimate to get bubbled off, DM'd off, booped away, slept, and it does nothing. So it makes far more sense for you to wait for more optimal situations by properly tracking many of the cooldowns that are going to shut you down and then finding that green light to go in. But of course, sometimes it's not possible to track everything. But if you're going to do a ton amount of damage very quickly, or the enemy is very distracted and most likely used a lot of their abilities already, it's more likely to be successful even if you don't have a 100% guarantee that they used every single bit of their utility. Now, the last thing that we need to talk about on Reaper, and the reason that he's so good in the meta right now, is he completely destroys enemies that do not respect the space that he claims. So we talked about him playing on the high ground, and we talked about him playing around corners, and right now, Zarya is kind of like a menace. A really good Zarya in ranked just gets to do whatever she wants. She has 2 bubbles, she goes in full charge, and many times those bubbles feel like invulnerability, but those bubbles aren't invulnerability to Reaper. They actually can be very easily broken by Reaper, and many times if a Zarya is way out of position and she's relying on one bubble, that Reaper that's around the corner can push the Zarya, break the bubble. Who cares if it gives her charge, because he's gonna just wipe her out right now because she is way out in the enemy space. She feels like she's safe, and Reaper is one of the few characters that it's very easy to consistently output a large amount of burst damage, and you're not at risk of dying either. If the Zarya gets peeled really heavily, the Reaper can just get away, and he can keep doing this over and over again, which will force the Zarya to play far more passive because she knows that the Reaper could easily kill her if she extends too far. Or it's going to allow you to just farm this Zarya because she's not protected in the way that she normally is. One bubble is going to keep you alive against a lot of characters in the game. You don't have to be afraid of characters like Genji just being able to kill you out of nowhere. But a Reaper can run up to you, break your bubble, and just murder you straight up if you do not respect his space and his damage. Now, this leads me to the last thing that you need to understand about the common play patterns of Reaper is you're setting up in an optimal position and you're not necessarily fighting the enemy all the time. You're waiting for that key moment to go and make your play. You're going to try to punish the enemy tanks, the enemy supports, make a teleport play, and then you have your Wraith for the majority of the time to get out. You get back to your team, you reset your cooldowns, you get back into your position, and you do it again. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Occasionally, you'll see an opportunity to use your Wraith to go back in, and you can fish for more and try to get a huge playoff if the opportunity presents itself. Or you're going to have your ultimate and you're going to try to set up that after tracking cooldowns. But in general, that's the playstyle for Reaper, and it forces enemies to respect you. It forces the enemy team to play much more conservative, and it's one of the few DPS in the game of Overwatch 2 that can actually bully the hell out of tanks. And ain't that fun? Now, if you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments down below and smash that subscribe. I really appreciate all the support. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.